The day of Ethan's wedding started with a strange heaviness I couldn't shake. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my apartment, smoothing the fabric of my dress for the fifth time. The soft ivory silk felt too delicate for the storm I was bracing for. My reflection looked calm, poised even, but inside, my nerves twisted like a knot tightening with every minute that ticked by. Ethan had always been the golden boy, the favored son, the charming leader, the one everyone expected to succeed. I, on the other hand, was always the quiet achiever, building Vanta solutions from nothing, carving out my own path in an industry that didn't often welcome women. I was proud of how far I'd come, but the family spotlight had rarely shone on me. When I arrived at the venue, a grand hall with towering windows draped in velvet, there was an undeniable chill beneath the glittering chandeliers. Smiles were bright, but eyes darted with something unspoken. I noticed Vivian Carter immediately, the daughter of Henry Lawrence, whose company had been a fierce competitor to ours for years. Vivian was radiant in a jade green dress, but there was a sharpness in her gaze that unsettled me. I forced a polite smile when our eyes met, but she turned away quickly. I had no illusions about our relationship. The ceremony was beautiful. Despite the tension, I felt mounting like a storm overhead. Ethan and his bride, Anna, exchanged vows with tearful joy, but when it came time for the reception, everything began to unravel. When the seating chart was announced, I hesitated before looking for my name. It was supposed to be next to Ethan's, near family, near the heart of the celebration. But it wasn't. Instead, I was assigned to a small table near the kitchen doors, far from the center of the room where the most important guests gathered. A place where waiters passed by with indifferent glances, where laughter was muffled and distant. I caught Vivian watching me from across the room, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. The humiliation settled deep inside me, but I kept my composure, telling myself this was temporary. A misunderstanding, maybe, Ethan would explain. But when I found him later, standing by the bar with a drink in hand, his eyes avoided mine. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "It's complicated." Anna insisted on the seating. I didn't want to cause a scene. "Complicated?" I whispered, voice breaking. "You let her do this to me?" He shrugged, guilt flickering across his face. I didn't want to start a fight. It's our wedding. But it wasn't just the seating. I overheard whispers from guests about my position at the event. Some looked at me as if I'd been deliberately sidelined, and I had. The night stretched on, each moment a sharp reminder that my family wasn't united. When I finally slipped out into the cool night air, the city lights blurred by tears I refused to shed inside. I realized then, nothing would be the same. That night marked a fracture, not just in my family, but in my own sense of worth. And the fire that humiliation lit inside me was just beginning to burn. The morning after the wedding, the sunlight filtered softly through my apartment window, casting warm patterns on the hardwood floor. The city hummed below, oblivious to the turmoil churning inside me. I sat at my kitchen table, cradling a cup of untouched coffee, my mind replaying the previous night's humiliation again and again. The memory of that seating chart, the cold weight of isolation, gnawed at my thoughts like a persistent ache. I tried to tell myself it was just one evening, one distorted moment blown out of proportion. But deep down, I knew it was a symptom of something much larger. A tangled web of resentment and jealousy that had quietly woven itself through my family for years. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from my assistant, Sophie. Meeting with Harrington this afternoon confirmed. He's eager to discuss the new proposal. That was something. A glimmer of business hope amid the personal chaos. I forced myself up, showered, and dressed for the day. In the mirror, my reflection looked tired but determined. No matter what the family did, my work at Vanta Solutions had to move forward. The drive to the office was uneventful, but as I entered the sleek lobby, the normal rush of adrenaline mixed with a lingering sting of vulnerability. I buried it under layers of professionalism as I stepped into the conference room to meet Thomas Harrington, a potential client I had been courting for months. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a welcoming smile, unaware of the storm brewing in my personal life. The meeting was productive, strategies discussed, timelines mapped out, and interests solidified. It was the kind of daydream I clung to, a reminder that not everything in my life was falling apart. Yet, just as the meeting wrapped up, my phone buzzed again. A text from my brother, Samuel. We need to talk. Lunch tomorrow. Just you and me. I stared at the message, the memories from the wedding floodgates opening anew. Our last conversation had been strained, raw wounds left to fester. Could I face him? Could I endure another meeting with the man who'd stood silently by as I was marginalized? The rational part of me said yes. Family was complicated, but it was still family. Perhaps this was a chance to untangle some of the knots. I replied simply, 1 p.m. Luciano's on 5th. That night, sleep was elusive. My mind raced between the threads of reconciliation and self-preservation. Was I opening a door to healing or setting myself up for more hurt? The days that followed unfolded in an uneasy balance. Calls from Gerald Winters and Aunt Diana added more unexpected connections, and old family histories resurfaced. Aunt Diana, whom I had barely spoken to for years, reached out after hearing about the wedding incident. Her voice was warm, tinged with sympathy. "Clara," she said gently over the phone, "sometimes family wounds run deep, but they can also teach us where our true strength lies." Her words resonated, stirring something I had buried beneath layers of pride and pain. Work became my refuge and battleground. The Nexus contract, my company's biggest client, was still hanging by a thread after the fallout with Bradford Enterprises. I spent hours coordinating with my team, preparing for what felt like an inevitable storm. And then, in the quiet of an evening when I was ready to let the weight crush me, my phone lit up with a new email, formal, polite, but tinged with the unmistakable undertone of necessity. Richard Bradford himself was reaching out, suggesting a meeting. The invitation was unexpected. A small spark of something flickered within me. Curiosity? Wariness? The faintest trace of hope. But I was no longer the woman who would accept less than she deserved just to keep the peace. This time, I would set the terms. The morning light was soft but unrelenting as I sat at my desk, the city skyline framed by the large window beside me. Papers and proposals lay scattered across the surface, but my focus kept drifting back to the email from Richard Bradford. His message was polite, measured, a stark contrast to the stormy history between our companies. I had delayed replying. It wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Trust had been fractured, respect had been denied, and yet here was an olive branch, tentative and unsure. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, trying to silence the whirlwind inside my mind. What did it mean to accept an apology? Could I reopen a door I had slammed shut months ago? The day blurred as I focused on client calls and team meetings. My project managers updated me on new contracts won, the momentum building steadily, without Bradford's business. Yet, somewhere in the background of every success, the unresolved tension with my family and Bradford Enterprises lingered. That evening, a text from Samuel blinked onto my phone. Lunch tomorrow is still on. I stared at the screen long after reading it. The last time we had sat down face to face, it had been tense, full of awkward silences and unspoken grievances. Samuel's eyes had darted away, burdened by guilt he couldn't fully voice. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted clarity for him, for me, for the years we'd lost. The next day arrived with a crisp breeze and the faint scent of rain. I found myself at Luciano's on 5th, a quiet restaurant tucked between the office towers. I arrived early, nerves tight as the waitstaff set the table. Samuel came in minutes later, looking older than I remembered. The weight of family expectations and disappointments etched into his features. We greeted each other with a tentative hug, the kind that held both distance and hope. As we settled into our seats, I studied him silently, trying to find the boy I once knew beneath the layers of tension. He spoke first, his voice low and tentative. "Clara, I'm sorry. For the wedding. For everything. I didn't realize how much my silence hurt you." His honesty surprised me. For years, he had been the quiet one, the peacemaker caught between competing loyalties. Now, he seemed vulnerable, struggling to break free from the roles we'd been assigned by family and history. "I've been angry too," I admitted, but not just because of the seating chart. It's what it represented. The way I've been seen, by you, by Tiffany, by everyone. Like I don't belong. He looked away, then back. "I know. And I hate that I let it happen. I thought if I said something, it would make things worse. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of resentment and misunderstanding. He confessed that Tiffany had orchestrated the seating change, fueled by jealousy he hadn't confronted. Their marriage was strained, brittle beneath the surface of polite appearances. I listened, the anger softening into a cautious understanding. This wasn't a fix-all moment, but a crack in the walls we'd built around each other. After lunch, as we parted ways, Samuel reached out and squeezed my hand. I want to do better. For us. I nodded, uncertain but willing to try. Back at the office, I shared the tentative progress with my closest advisors. Gregory, my CFO, was pragmatic. It's a start, but don't let your guard down. Bradford's proposal could be a trap. Sarah, my lead project manager, was more cautious. We've got momentum with the new clients. Why risk it for a client who showed such disregard? I weighed their counsel carefully. The opportunity to re-engage Bradford Enterprises was tempting, but the wounds ran deep. That night, I sat on my balcony with Marcus, watching the city lights flicker. He was quiet, sensing the turmoil beneath my composed exterior. Whatever you decide, he said gently, make sure it's because it's right for you, not because you feel pressured to fix what's broken. I smiled, grateful for his steady presence. The days ahead would demand strength and clarity, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face them on my own terms. The weeks following my lunch with Samuel slipped by in a blur of meetings, negotiations, and restless nights. Yet, beneath the steady rhythm of business, an undercurrent of change began to ripple through both my professional world and my personal life. One morning, as dawn's pale light filtered through the curtains, my phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor Gase, the Bradford Enterprises executive who had become an unlikely bridge between our companies. Clara, we need to talk. There's a new development. Can you meet tomorrow at the usual place? The message was brief, but urgent. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Despite our fractured history, Eleanor's presence had grown from mere formality to something more genuine, a reflection of the complexity behind the corporate walls. The following day, the air was heavy with anticipation as I stepped into Luciano's once more. The warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with soft murmurs of conversation. Eleanor was already there, seated by the window, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," she began, sliding a folder across the table. I opened it carefully. Inside were internal memos, emails, and reports detailing Bradford Enterprises' struggles since our departure. The alternative software, touted as a replacement for Nexus's system, was floundering. Delays, glitches, and growing frustration had taken their toll. Eleanor's voice was steady, but tinged with regret. Richard's team underestimated how integral Nexus's technology was. The transition has been disastrous. I nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. It was a bittersweet confirmation of what I had suspected. But there's more, Eleanor continued. Richard wants to make things right. He's prepared to issue a formal apology for how you were treated at the wedding. And he's proposing a complete reset, new contract, new terms, new leadership contacts. It's not just business. It's personal for him now. Her eyes searched mine, as if gauging whether I was ready to consider this fragile offer. I let the silence stretch between us before responding. Why now? After everything? Eleanor sighed. The wedding incident forced a reckoning, not just for you, but for them. Scott and Tiffany are dealing with their own fractures. Tiffany has been removed from the company's affairs for the foreseeable future. The family dynamics are shifting. Her words stirred a mixture of relief and wariness within me. I had known Scott's marriage was strained, but hearing it confirmed added layers to the tangled web of past grievances. Later that afternoon, I found myself sitting across from Marcus in my office, recounting the conversation. He listened intently, his brow furrowed. This could be a chance to reclaim what was lost, he said cautiously. But it has to be on your terms. I nodded. I'm not looking for a handout or an easy fix. If we engage, it has to be because it aligns with Nexus's values and future. The next few days were a whirlwind of internal discussions. Gregory and Sarah laid out detailed analyses of the risks and benefits. Gregory emphasized contractual safeguards, a substantial increase in fees, ironclad clauses protecting us from past pitfalls. Sarah leaned toward focusing on the new clients who had come to us because of our reputation. Amid the corporate strategizing, I received a call from Aunt Diana. Her voice was warm, a comforting anchor in the storm. "I'm proud of how you've handled everything," she said softly. "Your father would be, too." Her words unlocked a flood of memories, stories she'd shared about my father's struggles for respect in a male-dominated industry, the sacrifices he made that shaped our family's legacy. That evening, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. Marcus joined me, silent at first, then offering a steady presence as I navigated the swirling emotions. "Whatever you decide, Clara," he said, "make sure it's a decision rooted in strength, not fear or resentment." His words echoed in my mind as I stared into the night. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with risks and the possibility of reopening old wounds. But it also held the promise of growth, reconciliation, and reclaiming my place, not just as a businesswoman, but as a woman who refused to settle for less. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my choices balanced by a quiet confidence. The decision weighed heavily on me like a slow, gathering storm. Each morning, as I brewed my coffee and watched the city wake beneath the soft dawn, I felt the tension of choice pressing at my chest. Re-engaging with Bradford Enterprises meant navigating a maze of old wounds, new promises, and unspoken questions. Could I trust them again? Could I trust myself? The days that followed were filled with long meetings and countless phone calls. My team, Gregory, Sarah, and Marcus, became my sounding board, each offering perspectives shaped by their expertise and loyalties. Gregory, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward during one strategy session. "Clara, this isn't just a business deal. It's a test of resilience. We need to build terms that safeguard every inch of Nexus's value."
No shortcuts.
Sarah's voice was softer but no less firm. "And remember why we're here. It's not about chasing every big client. It's about preserving the integrity that brought us success." Marcus, balancing both, added, "Whatever you decide, make sure it's not a reaction to old pain. This has to be a step forward." I absorbed their counsel, grateful for their steadiness, but aware that this was ultimately my decision to make. Amid the professional whirlwind, my personal life echoed with its own changes. Scott had been quiet since our tentative lunch, but the rift between us remained palpable. When we spoke, it was cautious, careful, as if both of us were learning to navigate unfamiliar territory. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I found myself on the phone with Aunt Diana. Her voice, rich with wisdom, was a balm. "Sometimes," she said, "the hardest part is learning to forgive ourselves for wanting more. More respect, more acknowledgement, more peace." Her words settled into me, reminding me that this journey was not just about external battles, but about healing the fractures within. A few days later, I met Eleanor again at Luciano's. The restaurant had become a strange sort of neutral ground, warm, familiar, but layered with the tension of what had come before. "Richard is eager to move forward," Eleanor said, sliding a draft contract across the table. "But he insists on a face-to-face meeting. He wants to look you in the eye and discuss terms personally." I studied the contract carefully. The terms were more favorable, the language respectful, a marked shift from before. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed the fragile truce that had to be tested. "I'll consider it," I said finally. "But this won't be business as usual." Eleanor nodded, her expression unreadable. "We understand that." The night after our meeting, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every word. Trust was a delicate thread. One pull too hard could snap. I wasn't sure if Richard Bradford was ready to honor the new path, or if this was just another maneuver. Then, the unexpected happened. A text from Scott, sent late into the night. "Can we talk? Not about business. About us." My heart raced. This was a conversation I had both feared and hoped for, the next step in untangling decades of unspoken truths. The following afternoon, we met at a quiet park, the golden light of autumn filtering through the leaves. Scott looked older, wearier, but something in his eyes was open, vulnerable. "I never wanted to compete with you," he said softly. "I was scared you'd leave me behind. But I see now, I was only holding myself back." I listened, the weight of years between us finally beginning to lift. It was a fragile beginning, not a resolution, but a moment of honesty that had long eluded us. As we parted, I felt a tentative hope, not just for our relationship, but for myself. That night, I sent a carefully worded email to Richard Bradford, agreeing to a meeting but emphasizing the need for transparency, respect, and clear boundaries. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I was stepping into it on my own terms, guided by strength, clarity, and the hard-earned wisdom of knowing my worth. The morning of the meeting dawned crisp and clear, the city humming with its usual energy, unaware of the quiet storm unfolding in a glass-paneled conference room on the 42nd floor. I arrived early, nerves mingling with a strange calm I hadn't known I possessed before. This was more than a business meeting. It was a reckoning. Richard Bradford was already there, standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the sprawling skyline. He turned as I entered, offering a small nod, not quite friendly, but respectful. "Clara," he began, his voice steady. "Thank you for coming." We sat down, the contract spread between us, a document heavy with possibility and the weight of history. "I want to start by acknowledging something important," Richard said. "The mistakes we made, at the wedding, in how we treated you and your team, they were unacceptable. I want to offer a formal apology." He reached into his briefcase and handed me a letter, penned in his own hand. Reading it, I felt a flicker of genuine regret, something I hadn't expected from a man so accustomed to control. But words, no matter how sincere, were only the beginning. We spent hours discussing the new terms, protections to safeguard Nexus's intellectual property, guarantees of respect and clear communication channels, and an agreement that any future conflicts would be mediated openly, without underhanded tactics. It felt like the foundation of a partnership reborn, but built differently, on trust, transparency, and mutual value. Halfway through, Eleanor joined us, her presence steady and reassuring. She had been instrumental in facilitating this new beginning, a bridge between old wounds and future hopes. When the meeting adjourned, Richard and I stood face to face, the air between us charged with unspoken acknowledgments. "I hope this is the start of something better," I said, extending my hand. He shook it firmly. "So do I, Clara. So do I." Walking out of the building, the weight I'd carried for months began to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism. I knew challenges lay ahead, in business and in family. But I also knew I was no longer defined by past slights or fears. In the weeks that followed, Nexus secured several important contracts, not just with Bradford Enterprises, but with new clients who had come to respect our principles and our strength. Scott and I continued to rebuild our relationship, slowly untangling decades of resentment and misunderstanding. One evening, he invited me to a small family dinner, a tentative but heartfelt step toward healing. Aunt Diana remained a steady source of wisdom and encouragement, her stories reminding me of the resilience woven into our family's fabric. She once told me, "Clara, success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about how you carry yourself through the storms." I carried those words with me as I stood on my balcony one evening, looking out over the city lights shimmering below. The woman who had once doubted her worth was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who demanded respect not just from others, but from herself. The journey had been long, filled with unexpected turns and painful truths. But in claiming my own value, I had changed everything, not just for Nexus, but for the woman I was becoming. And as the night sky stretched endlessly above, I knew this was only the beginning.